please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
One sector which has looked good and which should look good because of the hot political election season this year and the next is going to be the consumption sector. When I say consumption, I mean both ends of the spectrum, both the staples, the FMCG companies and the other end discretionary as well. But what is consumption looking like in India, both urban and rural right now? We've got somebody who's tracked that and answered that question for decades now. Rama Bijapurkar is one of the most well-known consumer market strategists. She's worked with companies on their strategies. Ma'am, thanks very much for your time. Appreciate you joining in on the show. So I start with a simple question, what are consumption trends looking like, both in rural and urban India? And are you seeing a discernible pickup?
We can heave a sigh of relief, temporarily at least, because we have elections coming up. And that means a lot of money getting pumped into the system. The 2014 elections, apparently 30,000 crores got spent. This is going to be, I think, more money spending. To just look at it in terms of perspective, the entire Narega spend was about like 52,000 crores last year. So you're looking at an injection and therefore you will see some heightened economic activity. So I think we can heave a temporary sigh of relief. But if you look at the fundamentals, consumer India is not feeling so good right now. In terms of sentiment, all the consumer confidence studies are showing that it isn't bad days, but it certainly isn't good days either. The long term, of course, is positive, but in the next 1 year, people aren't feeling as positive as they did, let's say, a year ago. So it is, din bure nahi hai, zyada achhe honge, but right now the consumer is saying it's sort of middling. So I think we have a consumer sentiment issue to deal with. The other thing also is that I think consumption isn't something that you can pull out of a hat. It's not like a rabbit that comes out of a hat. You have to have income in order to consume. And if you need to have income, then you obviously need to have vibrant economic activity. So if you look at the last many quarters and in fact many years, you're actually seeing that consumption growth has been higher than investment growth. Now, consumers will continue to consume even if their incomes at a faster rate than the rate at which their incomes grow, as long as they believe that income growth is around the corner. And we just discussed the sentiment issue as well. So I think it is we need to see income growth in order to see far greater consumption. Consumption growths have been in the mid-single digits. And for a country like ours, for all the hype and hope we have of what consumption will deliver for us, I think that is, we've seen at least double that amount of growth on a consistent period, even in the 2000s.
I mean, you began your answer by saying that we can heave a sigh of relief because we've got elections and lots of money gets pushed into the system. Do you believe that will, I mean, election-related spending will really boost rural demand growth?
So as I said, elections will give us a temporary sigh of relief. But if you look at the nature of rural occupation and where do people earn from, so about 16–17% of households are basically entirely agriculture, about 40% are entirely non-agriculture, and the rest are mixed. So by and large, the major occupation is either you're a poor and small farmer, or you are labor, which is mostly construction labor, fungible construction labor, agricultural labor. So unless you actually start having sustained investments where this labor can be deployed in the shorter term, we're not actually going to see the fundamental health improve. If you're asking me, can we actually boost it a little bit? I mean, rural India, and that's the thing with India, right? The numbers are so large that even if everybody consumes a little bit more on a percentage basis, you will get your growth. But basically, we need to have work for people so that incomes can grow. And right now, not only isn't there work, we're also seeing a lot of price increases even in urban India. So the answer to your question is that in the shorter term, you can tinker it, but in the longer term, the fundamentals will improve when the fundamentals improve.
Okay. That point is made. Ma'am, rural growth used to be about 1.5 times or 2 times that of urban demand. Are we anywhere near that kind of growth in the rural markets?
I find actually I have a more fundamental problem with this rural and urban. you know, it is true that most of a large chunk of India's poor live in rural areas. It is true that about half of India's rich actually do live in rural areas as well. And also, if you look at the whole rural-urban continuum, as we're seeing in several categories, I think that what's good for urban is good for rural as well. The idea of, yes, there are a lot more people dependent on labor, so unless you actually improve it, how is it going to come back? It can come back if you improve infrastructure, because all models have shown that a little bit of increase in infrastructure causes more consumption than a equivalent increase in income at this point in time. But I think fundamentally you need to actually improve economic activity and improve investment for things to happen.
Post the GST disruption, are things back to normal now?
In fact, let me look back and say, yes, the wholesale channel did get hit. It is also true that if you look at very small manufacturers who feed, let's say, the local manufacturing that feeds both rural as well as small town urban, I think the transition that we're making from black to white is a painful transition, and that painful transition does actually increase prices to the customer. So I think both in urban as well as rural, we're seeing that if it is harder and harder to do things in cash, and you're going to have to pay the taxes that you're going to have to pay, then prices across the board are going up. The wholesale channel, firstly, I think we should be, companies, FMCG companies in particular, should be relying less and less on the wholesale channel. If you have been an absentee landlord with the customer and done a lot of business through the wholesale channel, then I think that going forward it is going to be hard, and direct distribution is what you need.
I mean, the markets come off a little bit from the highs, but still going okay. 10,457 is where we are. We're discussing consumption trends, and Rama Bijapurkar is with us. I mean, before we took that break, she told us that there is a consumer sentiment problem in the country. Okay, let's get some specific insights now. In terms of product categories, you know, naturals have been emerging as a big theme, in many categories. I mean, it is now a pretty significant percentage of the total in that category. Ma'am, could you tell us what trends are you seeing in the natural segment across categories?
You know, I'm a bit of a maverick and I have trouble understanding a trend. I think what we have in the case that you're referring to is somebody who came in with a right price performance point and with the proposition, yes, naturals is an attractive proposition around the world, not just here, right? Who would want chemicals? But often the problem has been that naturals haven't worked as well as the non-naturals, and now you have someone who's saying it is possible. So I certainly do believe that that is a powerful theme if you look at it across the board everywhere. But that does not mean that it's a one-way ticket. I think consumers are pretty smart. They look at benefit and cost, they determine value, and then they make their choices. A rather sleepy FMCG market has perhaps been woken up a little bit as a result of a new entrant coming in with a powerful proposition. If that entrant stops to deliver, then it will obviously reverse. It doesn't mean the trend is away from naturals. It just means that a particular company is not doing as well as it should.
I mean, have the large incumbents now sort of fully risen to the challenge? I mean, as you said, posed by Patanjali?
No, I think they are. I think whenever competition comes in, you know, these are all first-rate companies, and companies do respond. So I don't think anybody is giving it a walkover in any kind of way. But consumers actually have no religion around anything. They only have a religion around what gives me maximum value, mera paisa kaise vasool hoga. So I think companies are coming back. But the more interesting thing is that the amount of innovation that you see on the street, in the pavement markets, in goods that are coming in from China, is the kind of innovation we don't actually see in large companies. Even if you take something like food, for example, if you look at clothing, I think you're really seeing the smaller guys are actually far more active than the bigger so-called brands. So I think that is, if you say, is there a trend, I think that is a theme that is coming through repeatedly as far as India's consumption story is concerned.